All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen real quick. We are recording, so welcome. We'll have this and we'll send it out after our session today. But is everyone able to see my screen? Just thumbs up real quick. Thank you so much. Hi, if you're curious about blockchain, you're in the right meeting. I'm Pam Rabin. I'm a coordinator with the San Diego County Office of Ed, and I'm in the Educational Technology Department, and I'm joined by my colleagues. Just let you guys say hi real quick, and I'll start with Alicia.
Hi, everybody. And I need to apologize. I sent out the wrong date, totally on me. So thank you for being here. And I apologize for that.
Yep. Mark, you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Mark Brickley. I'm also a coordinator in the Ed Tech Department of Innovation.
Okay, and Sandra, our admin assistant's here.
Hi everyone, Sandra Walton, admin assistant for EdTech. I'm the face behind all the emails, so welcome.
Yeah, thank you for those. Those are helpful. All right, so our objectives today are really just to build a conceptual understanding with you about what blockchain is, kind of at a very high level, and then also to learn and think around what blockchain could be doing in the future for education. If you look down at the bottom of the page, there is a link, and I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to also put that in the chat for a bit.ly. It's bit.ly/curious about blockchain. And if you can go ahead and open that up in a separate tab, there are some slides from the presentation today, and they're mostly the ones that you're going to need. If you have that open, that'd be great. And then again, I'm going to let them kind of keep putting, if my colleagues will put that in the chat as we go, so I can kind of keep moving through here. And let us know in the chat too if you are unable to open it up or unable to find it. We'll help you out. Okay. All right, so to start off the discussion about blockchain and education, you really need to start thinking about what's happened in education over the last couple of decades. So back in the 1960s, maybe, and I might be dating myself here, back up, into the 1980s, there was a pathway that went something, like this. You would go to college, you get a degree, you would work in your field, you maybe get another degree, maybe specialize in something along the way, but pretty much the science and the knowledge around many fields stayed the same. You went to school, you got your degree, and you're pretty good to go. And people who are hiring you could look at those degrees and know that they would hire someone who was qualified for the position. But as we have kind of continued on more toward where we are now in 2020, the science and knowledge in the fields has just increased dramatically. And the knowledge, it's changing so rapidly that, you hear people say, oh, by the time you're out of college, the skills that you learned in college are already outdated. So the need to specialize and continue to learn has also increased, right? And what was once the ability to be a job that you're ready for is now kind of just the strong foundation for continuous learning and expertise. And maybe, you take all these certificates that you have and you'd be able to transition into a new job. So thinking about this, how can an individual that's having to get all these certifications and get all these skills, how can they cross over into another field? So just looking at my chat real fast, making sure I'm not missing anything. Just to kind of warm up in the chat, or just raising your hand, or however you want to let us know, who recognizes these? What is this? What do these badges tell you about things? I got Girl Scouts. Somebody put that in there. Anybody ever seen these before? Anybody earned these before? Right? Accomplishments. Thank you. And someone, I'm taking them back. Yeah. I hate to say, I think I had one of these. They're merit badges, right? You earn them for mastering a skill, right? So that kind of exactly big idea here is these are Girl Scout badges. They're great because they're very visual and they show the skills that someone's earned, right? All those certificates I was talking about. The badge means something. There's an entity behind it. There's a person who owns it, the Girl Scout who's got it on their, on their vest. and it tells you something about them, right? So this is kind of a fundamental concept of proof of concept, validity, showing your skills off, and you're the person who owns them. And so that's kind of what I want you to hold on to as we start thinking around blockchain today. So how do we take this concept and scale it into the larger academic world? All right, so, people don't really talk about blockchain, but also if you want to unmute, given our size of our group, or if you want to just put it in the chat, anybody know anything? Raise your hand if you have, like, what's your level of blockchain knowledge? We don't tend to talk about it a lot. Mine, before starting to research this, 0. I'm seeing that, yeah, right. And I like the person who said that the Girl Scout badges were earned. Yeah, for the most part, they weren't given.
Okay, I think I might know a little bit, but not a ton. But I know, like, for example, like if someone wants to sell or create and mint an NFT, then that it uses blockchain technology to kind of track the ownership, the sale of that NFT over time. So you can know if it's a way of knowing if it's authentic or not, if it's the only one.
Exactly. So it's something you're hearing out there. People are talking about it associated with NFTs. They're talking about it as some kind of validation or something that makes something immutable or permanent, right? Anybody else heard anything about them? I see the person who watched the PBS special on it. Absolutely perfect. I made this whole thing before that PBS series came out. And what was cool, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I did some of that. I understand some of that. Because to me, if you look at this picture, that is what blockchain meant to me. I mean, it was like something out there in the ether. And I was like, how can people have money that doesn't really exist? And how's all that work, right? So a lot of times it's a really abstract concept. And how this blockchain can affect education is kind of where we're going with tonight's talk. So yeah, if you get a chance to watch that PBS series, it's awesome. Now on that slide deck that I asked you to, the bit.ly to go to. So if you're just coming in, if my colleagues can put that link in the chat again, there's a slide here. And what I'm going to ask us to do, I'm going to set my alarm for about 6 minutes. There's 6 different videos here on blockchain. And it's sort of a choose your own adventure model where I'm going to ask everyone to mute so we're not hearing the videos, but on your separate tab, one of these videos, you probably get to jump in, pick a video that you want to get a little bit of background on so that it'll be the foundation for what we're also looking at today. I see someone's driving in their car. You might have 6 minutes where we're kind of watching videos individually. But if you're sitting at your desk right now and you have a chance, what I'm going to say about the videos is the very first video is more education heavy. And the last video, the one that's kind of on that yellow one, is more if you want to know blockchain, like get me into the roots of blockchain, and then I'll think about what it has to do with education. If you're like, I'd rather know how it's going to affect education, start with that first video. But I'm going to give you 6 minutes, and then I'll pull us back together because I found that this is a good way to give you a little foundation so that the stuff we talk about later, you can attach to that. So 6 minutes, go ahead and mute. Shelton, I'm not sure it's S. Shelton. You brought up an interesting thing about, okay, but what happens if the credential or the blockchain disappears? I don't know of any blockchain disappearing, as I wrote in the chat, but I think, theoretically, if the blockchain crashed and did disappear, I think it kind of becomes that same scenario where, sometimes schools would burn down and people's records would be lost. It becomes a nuisance. You'd probably have to go back to an issuing agency and have it reissued, similar to what the process that we go through today. I just had records sent from UCSD to SDSU, and I had to go through a third party to get that done. The issuing institution probably would still maintain a record of it. I don't think that that's going to go away unless blockchain is real solid, but it would become a nuisance because you probably would have to go through all that rigmarole of getting it sent out again. All right. So any thoughts or anything in the chat that you want to put in that you saw that might have been interesting to you or something you didn't know before, or you're welcome to unmute if you want to take turns. Just anything else you want to know about it at this point. We haven't gone over it extensively, but. All right, I think I went back a slide here. All right, so real quick, we're going to break this down. I'm going to throw you into, oh, we got it. Could we use this for professional development? For example, if people cast come out to trainers, maybe they could have a badge with a blockchain. I think eventually, Brent, yeah, that's going to be something that you can have some kind of, Alicia is going to be doing
We'll be talking about that with
kind of NFTs, and NFTs are similar to that badge idea. But yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. It just depends on, what the badge means, who the agency is behind it. The transcript possibilities are really interested with dual enrollment for colleges. Yes. And that ability for students to own that data. So really quickly, just looking at the time, I don't think I'm going to throw us into groups for this, but I want to take that knowledge that you just gained on your own little mini dive and apply it to breaking down this very lengthy definition bit by bit. So I'm just going to ask for your participation in the chat while I read this. But if we start with the first sentence, blockchain's a way of recording and tracking the trading, selling, existence, and ownership of tangible or intangible assets. Can someone put that into easy language, like kid-friendly language? What are we saying there? Okay, blockchain protects your data. You know who owns it. Yeah, the tangible and intangible assets. What do we mean by that? Digital contracts, yep. So what would a tangible asset be? Art, possibly. Real estate, yeah, definitely could be tied to real estate. Information, a pink slip for a car. Absolutely, anything you can touch, right? So the intangible things might be internet phenomenon, skills, right, that you have. So I might have earned a certificate that says I have skills, but what are the actual skills? That's an intangible thing. And experiences, right? I went to a summer camp and it was for dogs and I learned a lot of things, but it's that experience of having gone somewhere and been somewhere that might be an intangible kind of an asset. All right, next sentence. It's a shared ledger that's immutable and distributed across a broad network of computer servers. So shared ledger, anybody else know what a ledger card is, or am I really old and telling people that I used to use those when I worked in an office? Solid backed up data can't be changed. Yeah, immutable means it cannot be changed, right? Distributed, what's this broad network? What does that mean? How do you distribute something tangible or intangible across a broad network? It's multiple systems, multiple computers, right? So you're taking something that is a shared document and you're distributing it across multiple systems. So it doesn't exist in one bank or one entity. It's sort of like Google. It's kind of everywhere and anywhere and everywhere all at the same time. The servers are not controlled by one entity like a bank or a Google or a school. So it's not centralized. It's spread out among a lot of computers. And this next part, it cuts out the need for a middleman and does not require third-party authentication, making it more cost efficient. It is a high-level card catalog, reduces yeah, you don't have to have paper. This idea of cuts out the middleman, I kind of already told you that. If I can get things sent from San Diego UCSD over to an employer, over to another school, over to anybody without it having to go through a third-party validation process, then that's the middleman. If I can send money directly from me to Brent, that's cutting out the banks, right? I'm just having go straight from me to you directly, no middleman there. All right. Same thing with loans. If we can take money and put it directly into someone's account and, a bunch of people give someone a home loan, it does sound a little bit like the dark web. Yeah. All right. So it is a little more cost efficient. Each transaction stamped and signed with an encrypted digital signature. And the best thing I think, what other things do we get stamped and signed? What do we call that when you have paperwork and you have to have it stamped and signed? A notary, a DocuSign, exactly. DocuSign is an online notary, right? Sort of. Yeah, it's just an authentication that this is a valid paper and somebody else has done that for it. So part of the blockchain is that it comes that way, right? They're validated, authenticated by a consensus of networks. So each transaction that's sent out across that distributed network gets validated, authenticated, and it has to be by the consensus, and it has to follow the original blockchain or it gets tossed out. If it's not meeting up with the original blockchain, if there's a part of that chain of documents that gets separated, it gets thrown out, and we'll look at that in a second. And then despite the misgivings of the general public, it's proven to be pretty secure and reliable system for creating a permanent record of transactions, skills, or other records. So who creates the network of blockchain? People buy into it. They have to, it kind of is an agreement with, it's called data, it's what do you call it, mining. But yeah, it takes a lot of servers to do it. And it's like the cryptocurrency platform. Yeah, it's just a distributed network among people who are part of that network system. All right, so let's go in here. And again, everyone who's bringing up a lot more of the deep dive stuff, I'm going to say yes, yes, and yes. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and keep it surface level for today as best as I can. So the next thing is, again, anyone ever seen one of these? I doubt it. Yay, someone else out there has. Yeah, it's a ledger card. My father-in-law still uses these in his psychiatry office. It was how we kept track of patients who come and see him. You know, you put in whether they had an appointment, you put in that you charged them this much, they paid, any kind of transaction, any kind of ledger would go on a ledger card like this. So I'm going to use this as sort of a rough concept of blockchain, but it works for this purpose. You can think of it as one chain in the block. A ledger like this might be one chain. It's a record of a transaction. So in this case, we can imagine it's a school giving credit for a course that a student took. This is Bob Dylan. And it could be a transcript of many classes. It could be one class. It could be anything that you want it to be. Other areas outside of education. Who owns the original incarnation of a meme? You know, this is where the NFT stuff comes out that we're going to be covering. But it's a record that's given by some entity and is now owned by Bob Dylan because his name is the person that's on it, right? It's a record given to him and this is now his. So it can be a smart contract. It can be just one line of, it could be financial transactions. It could be lots of things, but just think of it as a record of a transaction that's been notarized, stamped, and validated. Okay, stay with me. All right. And then it's connected to all these other ledger cards. And the way that they're connected is called hashing. And they take either a little portion of the original ledger, the one before it, or they like almost like a summary of it, and they embed that into the code of the next ledger. So all of that hashing from one card to the next, from one card to the next, from one to the next, that's the chain element to it. And that's what makes it very hard to break because you're distributing that chain of information to this network of computer systems. So again, it doesn't exist on one computer where it would be easy to hack in, change some information, and then the whole system could be different, right? It has to be validated across this network. So if I am, I don't know, pick one of the little people in the middle of this picture, and I try to change the blockchain and send it out there, it's going to come across these other computers that are going to be like, nope, that's not right. That doesn't match, you know, this section of the chain got mixed up. And it's going to kick it back out and it's going to say, nope, this is wrong. So it has to be validated across the network, and that's where some of that immutable validation comes from. It makes what the structure something that anyone can view it, but it's really, really hard to alter. And what I've read and what I've seen said, someone was asking who owns these networks. If you take all these networks and you say somebody owns a lot of them, it takes a lot of money to set up those systems. And for you to own enough of it to be able to invalidate the blockchain, it's almost like not worth the amount of money that you would have to put in to do that. It would be such an immense expense that it would require effectively breaking the chain outweighs any economic benefits of doing it. So, if we think about student privacy here, students might be sent the full certificate that shows their grades, that shows all of the information. And what might be out there on the blockchain would just be the validation that what Mark Brickley has on his transcript that has this full measure that can be checked is valid, and it's coming from us and it's valid. So the validation's out there for everyone to see, that kind of transparent part, but the part that actually goes to the student, to the learner, they have more of the full details. All right, and just to kind of go quickly into this, I can't go too deep, but if you watch that KPBS series, they do a really good job here. What keeps the encryption? There's these ideas of public and private keys. You can kind of think of it as a password, like a username and a password. So the student sends out their proof of transcript. It's addressed using their public key. That person sends it to another person's public key. It gets encrypted. And the only thing that can decrypt it would be that person, the receiver's private key. So that's, I think in education, the biggest thing we would want students to understand about this is that they should never publish a private key, never share a private key. If you come to Alicia's NFT class, she'll tell you the terrible story about a girl who lost her Justin Bieber NFT because she shared her private key. And that's kind of the big, we say don't share passwords, but when it comes to cryptocurrency, when it comes to blockchain, when it comes to NFTs and all this stuff, never share that private password. And at this moment in time with blockchain, don't lose it either, because if you don't have it, you can't decrypt the information, and it's like it doesn't exist. Which is why we're probably not doing heavily blockchain things right now, because this all is being figured out as we speak. All right, so blockchain and all this kind of stuff, what's it got to do with education? What might the effect be in the future for education? All right. So there's some big ideas. I've got 3 of them for you really to hold on to. The first one is kind of an idea of high resolution of identity. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you have a learner profile. And again, thinking back to the old days where your certificate from a school would say, hey, I'm job ready. You might have had a couple of letters of recommendation from someone. You might have had a couple of degrees that they earned. You may even looked at their transcript. That's how you hired people, right? And you would have to go and validate. You'd have to call the references. You'd have to, if you really were checking, you call the school and make sure that certificate that person says that they graduated from Harvard is real, that they really did graduate from there. And maybe you do that by looking at the transcripts. Now imagine you have 150 people that you've employed and you have to look through it. You have, you're a college and you're trying to validate all these scores for students. A lot of times it doesn't happen. It's just too many, or they go through people. And then think about the things they're not saying about these people. We talked about the intangible things. So this high resolution of identity, if you can start having people own their certificates, if you can have them own their experiences, if you can have them own all the little micro credentials that they've earned in their life, you start to have a better understanding of who that person is and what experiences they've had and what kind of employee they might be or what kind of student they might be. So you're getting a better idea of what their true qualifications are. Then you have this idea of validation of skills. So high resolution of identity, validation of skills now. You have the person and they have all these degrees and they want to send them off to a university or an employer or a job, someone has to validate these skills. But with blockchain, the validation is there. because they're out there, they're transparent, they've been issued, they're immutable. You can send these off to an institution yourself. You don't have to go through the original issuer. In the case of the Girl Scout badges, you don't have to go back to the Girl Scouts, right? You've got the badge, you own it. I can say, hey, Alicia, look, I've got this badge, and Alicia pretty much can guarantee it's valid. Especially if you know, it's really, I don't know if anyone's out there making Girl Scout badges or not in the black market, but there are definitely people who lie about their credentials, right? So the validation's included within that block. It's always there. A student doesn't have to go through multiple validation efforts. It removes the issuing agency from needing the credentials to be validated over and over again. I mean, I probably have had to have my credentials validated and paid to have them validated numerous times over my academic career. If I just owned them and that didn't happen, that gives me, it's kind of an equity issue in that sense, right? It makes record sharing more cost effective and more efficient. And my third big idea here for you to think about is personal data agency. I own my records. So today, if you have official transcripts, and I know they're all sent through the internet now, so maybe this isn't as true, but I know when I went to graduate school, I had to send an official transcript. And if that had been sent to me first and I opened the envelope, they were no longer official transcripts, right? There were all these crazy things around it. They're seen as compromised. So you have more of a liquid transcript where you have all this data, you know where the credits are, you know they'll be accepted. You don't have to hunt down a professor or a syllabus to prove you know and how well you learned it, right? The skills and the classes that you've taken. So let's say you're going from one university to another and you've had some classes at this university, but the new university says, well, we don't know anything about what Psychology 101 looks like over at this university. That's where you'd have to go hunt people down, and you used to have to prove those records and prove those skills. The universities can kind of just accept them if this blockchain happens in a more efficient way in the future. Students who switch majors or schools or can show skills outside of the traditional schooling. If you have work experience that has allowed you to learn coding and you can show all those skills that you have, that should be able to that should be able to count for something. Does it count towards some higher education? Does it count towards a certification that you can get? They can show that they already have these skills, they've been validated, and they don't have to go through with finding them again. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions at this point before I move on? And the last kind of big idea here is once you have the ability, so this is where AI comes in. So if you're like, we need to know, we know, yeah, tonight's a surface level course to kind of just get your toes wet in the idea, because this blew my mind when I started thinking about it. When you start looking at a student owning the certificates, the experiences, and the fact that you can create these kind of smart contracts that have a ton of information in them that you own. If you now start getting artificial intelligence algorithms kind of going in there and looking at the skills that people have, right? Saying, oh, I'm going to pull this skill out of this credential and that skill out of this credential. And I know if you have this combination of skills, you can do this thing. Then you start getting somewhere really interesting, because now you have a system that might be able to start telling students, you need 3 more credits and when you could shift to this major. If you took this 1 more series of courses, you would be able to qualify for another job. Or, hey, 97% of the people who have this other unrelated job that you may never have thought of have the same skills as you. Or, there's this micro credential that you could earn, and you could earn another $30,000 a year or something like that. So once the skills are able to be immutable and broken down and turning into this kind of micro skill idea across contents, we get into a really interesting area with education and skills and things like that. So those are kind of those big ideas again around what does that mean? And then exactly what does that mean for education? So in education, it means we may be moving someday. I don't think it's going to be right now because blockchain is pretty early, but I think for educators and I think for anyone interested in technology and things like that, to know kind of where this might go is a little important because we might be moving toward skills. We talk about mastery versus cranking everyone out through a system where you all are going to graduate when you're, a certain age, or, when we talked and sat in our groups and we started talking, and if anyone wants to chime in, feel free to unmute, I'll see you. But that's pretty much what I have for the end of the slide is these big ideas of high resolution of identity, validation of skills, personal data agency, and then that last one, which is micro skills. And what does that mean for the future? So if we're eventually going to be putting things into blockchains, or we're going to be looking at micro skills and being able to manage that at a different level, that could fundamentally shift the way that we look at education in general and the way we track where people are in terms of either higher education, but I think it could eventually work its way down into lower education as well. Maybe not kindergarten, but so any thoughts or any ideas? Thank you, Steph, for talking about what you talked about, because that was exactly where I was going. But I am interested in knowing what other people are thinking.
Hi, this is Jamie. I'm off camera at the moment, but I was thinking about like that notion of I know digital badges. We were talking in my small group, and I remember the idea of digital badges, like whether for staff or for students, being a way to like represent the skills you've kind of acquired. Like we talked about the Girl Scout badge, and how it didn't really catch on broadly, and then also how some companies were trying to say, oh, okay, you don't necessarily need the degree in this, but you have to show evidence of the skill somehow, and whether that comes in a certificate or a badge or something. And again, how that hasn't yet caught on. And it's just like, what's going to be, I guess, the tipping point for companies or for like the broader workforce. And I said in the chat, I think I noticed that LinkedIn seems to be building an algorithm where they're trying to job match, and they'll give you like a recommendation. You have this many matches and skills to like this job that's open. You might want to apply, something like that. So that was interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely, I've been to conferences now. The ASU GSB conference down in San Diego this year, they were talking a lot about blockchain, and there are companies like Accredible is one company that are they're taking the idea of certification, and they're a company for profit. So that's that middleman I'm kind of talking about. But they are definitely using AI to look at skills, to look at what does that mean, or what are other people in your field of job doing, and then also connecting that in like a social media kind of way, like LinkedIn does, to say, all right, Pam, you've got all these skills and you've got these things, but who are your contacts that we know that can help validate that? So I think with blockchain, there's a lot around validating. There's a lot around, again, just students owning the information for themselves. If I own my information, I can decide what I send out as well. So if I'm going for a particular job, I can more readily have something, on my cell phone, and then I'm making my resume and sending off the things that I need to be sent off quickly and easily. And if we can get to a point in our world where that's the case, then again, it becomes a little bit more of an equitable environment, because you don't have to go hunt all those things down, or be in a situation where high school didn't keep it, or you didn't keep it. Because sometimes, when you're applying to colleges for the first time and you're having to write those essays, and you think back like, oh, I had this great experience in high school, but I didn't keep that certificate, and I have no idea what skills were behind that certificate. If you were able to just look that up imagine you just pick up your phone and you're like, oh yeah, 1985, I went to a Rotary camp and we talked about entrepreneurship or something like that. That definitely happened. I do not have anything left from that to say what I learned or did, but it did I can say it did make an impact in my life in terms of me thinking about career choices and things like that. All right, well, we're at 4:56 on a day when you're about to go into a holiday weekend. So I really do appreciate everybody coming in today. I think it's an interesting topic. The more we find out, we're interested in hosting some more things just to give you information. We do have And I don't, Alicia, if you have the date, we are working on a crypto class just to kind of talk a little bit about that at surface level again, everybody get their feet wet. And then also Alicia is going to be hosting one on NFTs coming up and what that might mean for education. Do you know the date on that, Alicia?
It is the 30th.
I just want to jump in and say thank you for always offering these classes. This has been just a fabulous experience this past year with all that you've offered in addition to this. And I had not made the connection between education and blockchain until you offered this class. And I thought, oh my gosh, how is that possible? So you inspired and sparked some interesting thoughts and opened my mind to other possibilities. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I know it's a topic that the innovation division is trying to take on and already think about how can we create our own blockchain. We're kind of toying with the idea with our data analyst, and I think our deputy superintendent would like to see some kind of functional representation soon. So we're definitely thinking a lot around it. Oh, and Steph said you're working with them. Okay, cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're talking blockchain for like just exactly this, is to be able to have access and what that looks like and what are the key elements that we think are necessary. And of course, there's a couple different school districts, so we all have our own focus. So we're coming to a consensus.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you hopefully on the 30th.